Developing news coming out today that we are hearing right now, President Donald Trump is in closed-door briefings. You're going to see the video footage. They're saying war briefings, as today we saw the talks take place between the United States and Iran in Geneva. We saw them pause, take a break, resume, and now they've come to an end. And we're hearing there is no deal. And right now there are closed-door meetings taking place, likely discussing the next steps. Take a look at the latest headlines with me so you can see it for yourself. Live updates. U.S.-Iran nuclear talks wrap up with no announcement of a deal as the risk of war looms. Dozens of the world's deadliest fighter jets arrive in Israel as Trump orders Iran to end its nuclear program. Updates. U.S.-Iran nuclear talks live. Third round concludes. Now, Oman has touted that there was progress, and we have U.S.-Iran nuclear talks were positive, one senior U.S. official says. And the U.S.-Iran, they resumed their nuclear talks as Trump is now ratcheting up war threats. We're hearing there's a greater military buildup around Iran happening at this very moment. Iran strikes also threaten to deplete U.S. weapons supply and put American troops at risk. They're saying that we could potentially deplete our weapons. And can the U.S. and Iran reach a nuclear deal to avert a war, or are we too far gone? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What are we about to see unfold here? I'm going to play for you the video footage, and one particular person here is saying it looks like we're entering war. It's likely going to come this week. All of the pieces are moved into place. The USS Gerald Ford is now on its way almost to its position for Iran. More fighter jets from the United States have entered into the region. They are now stationed in Israel. We're hearing that there is potential to launch for war here that is going to be happening. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? War or deal? Unless something dramatically changes here very soon, it looks like we're going to be going to war. Drop it in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. But as of today, February 26, 2026, I'm going to get you caught up on the latest, as we're hearing that right now, closed-door meetings the rest of the day. Donald Trump is in, and you're going to see the footage coming out. They're saying war briefing is the next step, as the talks in Geneva have seemed to yield nothing on this. So let's go ahead and dive right in and get you caught up on the latest. Now, if you appreciate the breaking news updates just coming out here, take a quick second, hit that thumbs up like button for me. Just help spread this out further across the YouTube platform while we're live. Subscribe to stay up to date. If this is your first time here, it's totally free. Pretty much doing updates every single day, and just turn on the notification bell to get notified when I go live so you can get the breaking news. And as you know, here on the channel I cite all the sources, so all these articles I'm going to be referencing, I'm going to put them on the screen, read right from them, show you the dates, the sources, but also have them hyperlinked in the description so you can click them and go read them for yourself. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in, and let's just go ahead and start off with some video footage so that way you can see the latest for yourself, what's going on right now.
After midnight hammer, they were warned to...
Just a second. I typically listen to things on 2 speed, 3 speed, 4 speed. Let's slow it down and play it at 1 speed for you.
After midnight hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue. They're starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon.
President talking about Iran from his big speech this week, the State of the Union. Third round of nuclear talks are underway right now, and we are many days into President Trump's ultimatum to Iran to reach a deal within 10 or 15 days or else. Trump's already positioned that or else. Its massive buildup of U.S. military in the Middle East, with the largest deployment of air and naval assets to the region. Fighter jets are there, also deployed to the area, and the world's most advanced aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, is on the way there. So again, the largest that we've seen since the Iraq War. Axios, Air and Naval. Axios is reporting White House envoy Steve Witkoff says the Trump administration wants an Iran nuclear deal that will remain in effect indefinitely. So no date on this. They don't want to have to keep going back and back and back. No more bites at the apple for Iran. Secretary of State Marco Rubio not mincing words.
I think progress needs to be made. It would be good if progress was made on Thursday. And I would say that the Iranian insistence on not discussing ballistic missiles is a big, big problem. I'll leave it at that.
Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin from D.C. Jennifer.
Harris, let's be very clear that if talks in Geneva fail today, the U.S. will likely be at war in the Middle East by next week. Most U.S. warships have pulled out to sea from the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, and Fox News has learned that from an operational status, the U.S. base in Bahrain is in a state of mission-critical status, down to a few dozen Americans operating out of the U.S. Navy's Middle East headquarters. The Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier strike group has now left Suda Bay in Crete after a resupply stopover and is now heading east. At a typical speed, the carrier would be near the coast of Israel by Friday. The latest squadron of F-22 stealth fighter jets left Lakenheath Air Base in the UK on Tuesday, and for the first time ever are being based in Israel. Open-source satellite images show them lined up on the tarmac there. The buildup in the Middle East continues as negotiators are scheduled to resume talks at 5:30 p.m. Geneva time, with several U.S. Air Force heavy-lift aircraft in transit, including one C-5 Super Galaxy, the Air Force's largest strategic airlifter, designed by Lockheed Martin to carry immense cargo loads over intercontinental ranges. 13 C-17 Globemaster, and 2 KC-46A Pegasus used for air refueling. Here are the U.S. demands brought to Iran in Geneva: destroy all 3 nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, deliver all enriched uranium to the U.S., no sunset clauses, zero enrichment, but keep the Tehran reactor, minimal sanctions relief up front, more if Iran compliant. The U.S. negotiating paper was first reported by the Wall Street Journal.
First and foremost, after their nuclear program was obliterated, they were told not to try to restart it, and here they are. You can see them always trying to rebuild elements of it. They're not enriching right now, but they're trying to get to the point where they ultimately can. Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region.
President Trump is currently receiving an intelligence briefing that started at 11 a.m. at the White House. The president has all closed-door meetings today, including, quote, a private meeting, no press, at 3 p.m. today. The focus of that meeting, likely the talks in Geneva and what comes next. Harris?
Jennifer, thank you.
There you have it, you guys. 3 p.m. closed-door meetings, the likes of which will be the next steps after the talks in Geneva have yielded no results. And she said it is very likely that by next week, we will be in war. Let me know if you agree in the comments, yes or no. Do you think we're going to be in war next week? We're hearing that things are getting positioned right now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but let's take a look at some more video footage, as there has been a lot just pouring out recently now that we've seen the talks conclude and there is no deal. And we're hearing that if no deal was yielded, that is very likely we're going to see some strikes unfold. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Analyst Rebecca Heinrichs is here with now in New York City. Do you think, I'm going to ask you the same question that I have to ask everybody. Do you think we can get a deal without military force? And the answer is?
I don't think so.
Thank you very much. A clean-cut answer. Why not?
Well, because the supreme leader is 86 years old, and he's the only person in Iran who can make a decision about the Iranian regime's nuclear program. And he is not going to give that up, give up its ballistic missile program, stop funding these terrorist groups throughout the region. These are all demands that Secretary Rubio continues to make on the regime. So it's not just about the nuclear program, it's the ballistic missile program, it's the rest of the bad behavior in the regime, and there's no indication the supreme leader is willing to do that.
Have you any idea what form a military attack could take? I mean, like, for example, knocking out the ballistic missile factory, I'm sure we know where it is, or knocking off the head of the Revolutionary Guards. I'm sure we know where he is. Could we do something like that?
We could, and I think for our viewers, it's really important to keep in mind why this is a moment of opportunity. It's because the Iran regime is so weak. It's the weakest it's been probably since its inception, since the late 70s, early 80s, and that's because of the United States' leadership with Israel taking out their military capabilities, degraded Iran's missile force by half, so they still have about half of it left, and of course significantly degraded the nuclear program. So a military option could conceivably, Stuart, I think it'll be primarily from the air and the sea. There's not significant American ground forces in the region. No. So it would be an attack from the air primarily, and you can take out their missile program and IRGC, that's the religious leaders, military, paramilitary group. And also there's this pickaxe facility, which is where we believe that the Iranians are continuing their illicit nuclear activity beside the Natanz facility, which is what we struck in Midnight Hammer.
You've got to have something happen sooner or later, haven't we? I mean, we can't just this thing drag on and on and on.
No, and it's also really important for U.S. credibility and the credibility of President Trump that he enforces his red line, which he's not walked away from that to his credit. And so I think it's really important to him. But again, he's going to think President Trump's going to weigh what the options are so we can carry out a planned military attack so that the United States has agencies to not get dragged into a larger Middle Eastern war at the lowest cost to the American people. I think that's what President Trump is going to be weighing.
The administration has launched an investigation after Cuba's Coast Guard killed.
There you have it, you guys. Now they're switching topics over to Cuba, and I shared that with you as soon as it had come out yesterday with the breaking news. We're still getting more information on that, but there you heard her say that the Trump administration, they are holding to their word. Now, if you appreciate Donald Trump and the way he's been handling Iran, drop a 47 in the comments. Now, if you don't appreciate him, drop a 46. If you like the way the previous administration handled things, but she said that he has a red line and he's holding to it. A lot of people actually vocalizing the fact that they feel like Donald Trump has been very, very patient with Iran, trying to push for diplomacy and get a deal rather than reverting to strikes and war immediately right away. Let me know your thoughts. Do you appreciate Donald Trump's approach? If so, put a 47. If no, drop a 46 in the comments for the way the previous administration handled the Iranian regime. But we're hearing their time might be coming to an end. In fact, let's take a look at some more video footage where they're discussing how it is very likely that right now he is in closed-door meetings the rest of the day. They said there's a 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time meeting that started closed door, likely discussing what unfolded in the Geneva talks and the next steps. They're saying very likely, since there was no deal, we could be looking at a wartime briefing. Let's take a look at more video footage covering this so that way you can see it for yourself.
Senate Armed Services Committee member Mark Wayne Mullin joins me now. Mr. Senator, we just heard from Jennifer Griffin, who says, look, if these talks end unsuccessfully, America could be at war by the end of this next week. And she says that the president's holding a series of closed-door meetings today. That's ominous, isn't it?
No, Stuart, I don't like using the word at war. The president's going to defend our interest, and our interest is home and abroad. The truth is, the Ayatollah can't be trusted. We're not going to allow him to enrich. We're not going to allow him and this murderous regime to be able to have a nuclear weapon. It'll destabilize not just the U.S. economy, but the world economy. There isn't anybody. If you think about it, Russia and China's not weighing in on this because they don't even want the Ayatollah to have a nuclear weapon. We were very clear. We didn't go into this looking for regime change. During the 12-day war, Stuart, the president made it very clear. We know where you're at, speaking to the Ayatollah, saying, and if we chose to, we'll take you out. But he wanted diplomacy to work. We don't want a vacuum to take place where ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or Taliban can go in and run into Iran. We support the Iranian people to be able to rise up and take their country back. But there doesn't seem to be another leader to take place. And so the last thing we want to do is to cause another Arab Spring like underneath Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. But at the same time, if this Ayatollah, the Ayatollah that's been saying he wanted a nuclear weapon since 1979, continues to proceed down this path, which he has so far, we won't have any other choice but to remove their infrastructure and remove him permanently and let him go off to wherever he wants to chase those virgins that supposedly he's promised.
Okay, Mark. You had a heated exchange with Bernie Sanders over Obamacare.
All right, so there you have it, you guys. And man, let me know your thoughts. Do you agree? He said we should send him to wherever it is he says he's going to go, so that way he can get those virgins he talked about. Man, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree? Should we strike and Iran, take down the IRGC and put an end to the supreme leader? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, yes or no. But let's take a look at some of the headlines coming out so you can see it for yourself from the live feeds coming out. Live updates, the U.S. and Iran nuclear talks wrap up. with no announcement of a deal as the risk of war looms. Now, the concern is that they said if nothing is going to come of this, Donald Trump and the administration is not going to let this drag out. They're not going to let Iran just kind of string them along. And we're hearing that right now we have the biggest buildup since the Iraq War, and there's 1/3 of the U.S. naval fleet that is surrounding Iran. Fighter jets yesterday arrived in Israel, and we're hearing that there is a buildup that does not look like a show of force. It looks like preparation for a full-on attack and a long-endured war. Now, let's take a look at this so that way you can see it for yourself. Iran and the United States held hours of indirect negotiations Thursday today over Tehran's nuclear program, but they walked away without a deal, leaving the danger of another Middle East war on the table as the U.S. has gathered a massive fleet of aircraft and warships in the region. Oman's foreign minister, Badr al-Busadi, who mediated the talks in Geneva, said that there had been significant progress in the negotiations, without elaborating, though. But just before the talks ended, Iranian state television reported that Tehran was determined to continue enriching their uranium, rejected the proposal to transfer it abroad, and sought the lifting of international sanctions, indicating it was not prepared to meet U.S. President Donald Trump's demands. So here we have, right after the meetings, Tehran coming out and saying, we will still continue to do exactly what the U.S. is asking us not to do. We reject their proposal, and we also reject the international sanctions and want them to be lifted, indicating it was not prepared to meet U.S. President Donald Trump's demands. We're hearing right now there is closed-door meetings going on, likely war briefings for the next steps after the failed deal of the Geneva talks. Trump wants a deal to constrain Iran's nuclear program, and he sees an opportunity while the country is struggling at home with growing dissent following nationwide protests. Iran also hopes to avert war, but maintains that it has the right to enrich uranium and does not want to discuss other issues, like its long-range missile program or support for armed groups like Hamas or Hezbollah. Now, here's what to know. Oman's foreign minister, Badr al-Busadi, who has been mediating the negotiations, he wrote on X that technical-level talks would take place next week in Vienna, home of the International Atomic Energy. Now, let me know your thoughts in the comments. We've heard this warning that Iran is going to try to drag it out, stall for time, try to protect their nuclear facilities, try to prepare for a potential retaliatory attack if they are hit. Should we continue the talks? If you think so, put talk in the comments. If you think no, it's time to strike, put strike. As we actually heard that one woman in that interview from Fox come out and say, right now they are weak. This is the time to hit them. The IRGC has never been this vulnerable. Now is the time to strike. Let me know in the comments what you think. In an interview with Iranian state television, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi said that the talks with the U.S. were some of the country's most intense and longest rounds of negotiations. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comments. Araghchi and U.S. Special Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff held multiple rounds of talks last year that collapsed after Israel launched its war against Iran in June. Araghchi says indirect talks with the U.S. were the most intense that they have seen. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi said the indirect talks with the U.S. over its nuclear program had been one of our most intense and longest rounds of negotiations. Araghchi made the comments in an interview with Iranian state television. He offered no specifics, but said what needs to happen has been clearly spelled out from our side. The U.S. has yet to offer a comment on the talks in Geneva. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for a comment, but we're hearing at this moment there is a closed-door meeting taking place in the United States White House. Now, just in, Iran's foreign minister calls indirect U.S. talks one of the most intense and longest rounds of negotiations. You can see this is the one that we just saw. And they're calling for the talks to resume in Vienna. Now, Oman's foreign minister said Thursday today that the talks between the United States and Iran ended in Geneva, but will resume soon, he says. Badr al-Busadi wrote on X that there has been significant progress in the negotiations without elaborating. He said technical level talks would take place next week in Vienna, home of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, which is the nuclear watchdog, which has been trying to get access to Iran's nuclear facilities, but Iran has been denying them access. There was no immediate comment from the U.S. or Iranian officials. Analysts had been concerned that ending the talks without an immediate deal could spark U.S. military action against Iran. Let me know your thoughts. I think there's a lot of people speculating that is what is coming next. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at some more updates here. Dozens of the world's deadliest fighter jets arrive in Israel in the last 24 hours as Trump orders Iran to end its nuclear program, which we just saw a little while ago. Breaking news, Iran basically coming out and saying no on national TV. A dozen American F-22 Raptor fighter jets, representing more than $4 billion of military spending, they have arrived at the end at an Israeli Air Force base amid a massive buildup of U.S. military hardware in the Middle East. The planes, widely considered the best in the world due to their speed and stealth, arrived in the Jewish state Tuesday evening as tensions with Iran soar, the Jerusalem Post reported. Designed by Lockheed Martin, the F-22s cost around $350 million each and are so vital to the U.S. that the Pentagon has forbidden their sale or licensure to any foreign government. The dozen jets were previously stationed at the RAF Lakenheath base in southern England and were seen taking off earlier on Tuesday, the Times of Israel reported. One was reportedly forced to return to the base due to a technical issue before taking off again later in the day. F-22 and F-35 fighter jets, along with B-2 bombers, were used in June 2025's Operation Midnight Hammer, in which the U.S. struck 3 Iranian nuclear sites. More than 300 U.S. military aircraft are deployed across the Middle East, according to open-source intelligence monitoring and publicly available flight data. The jets arrived just days after the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, arrived off Israel's coast ahead of Thursday's scheduled nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran in Geneva, Switzerland, which, as I shared with you, have come to an end and yielded no deal. President Trump has repeatedly threatened to attack Iran if the talks fail, while the Islamic regime has vowed to strike Israeli and U.S. targets in the Middle East in a response. In his State of the Union address Tuesday night, Trump branded the Iranian regime the world's #1 sponsor of terror and ordered Tehran to end its nuclear program. We are in negotiations with Iran. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those sacred words, "We will never have a nuclear weapon," Trump said. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy, but one thing is certain: I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon, he added. Can't let that happen. That was Donald Trump in his State of the Union address on Tuesday, warning that they cannot have this. Now, at the same time, as they mentioned, the Omanian mediator said that there was much progress, that it was very good. And we actually have, take a look at this, coming out just 2 hours ago after the talks ended. U.S.-Iran nuclear talks were positive, the senior U.S. official said. Let's take a look at this. Here's actually a photo from today with the talks that took place. You can see Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in the middle, and to the right, the Omanian mediator meeting with them, meeting with the two groups separately, acting as the mediator to pass on information one to the other. Now, this article says that Thursday's nuclear negotiations between the U.S. and Iran in Geneva made significant progress, and there will be further discussions next week. Omanian Foreign Minister Badr al-Busadi said at a conclusion of the talks. So that's what the mediator is saying. A senior U.S. official told Axios that the talks were positive, but did not immediately provide additional details. Now, here's why it matters. The meeting was seen by many in the Trump administration as the last chance for diplomacy before President Donald Trump decides whether to launch a war. And we're hearing, as we speak right now, there is a closed-door meeting happening with Donald Trump. There is a briefing taking place, and a lot are coming out and saying a war briefing is potentially happening with the next steps after the failed talks of Geneva to date. Now, we're going to see. I'm going to keep you up to date, but a lot of people are saying as soon as next week we could be in war. Some people in the comments saying they believe it's going to start this weekend. Now, reading on, it says the intrigue. The talks between Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi took place over several hours in a morning and an afternoon session. The U.S. side was disappointed by the Iranians' positions during the morning session, according to sources familiar. So, there's some information right there coming out that the U.S. was disappointed with Iran. It's unclear if something significant changed in the afternoon to lead to more positive statements from al-Busadi and the U.S. official afterward. Al-Busadi said that the next steps would be consultations in Washington and Tehran, then technical discussions between nuclear experts in Vienna next week. Now, breaking it down, this was the third round of talks in the past few weeks. They were held in two formats, indirectly with al-Busadi relaying messages between the two sides, and directly between the United States and Iranian negotiators, according to sources with knowledge. So they actually did meet face-to-face today. The Iranians presented their much-anticipated draft proposal for a nuclear deal during the morning session. Al-Busadi and the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, both participated in the negotiations. The sides then took a break, during which time Witkoff and Kushner met with Ukrainian officials before resuming in the afternoon. What they're saying: during the break, an Iranian official told Al Jazeera that Iran had rejected the idea of permanently abandoning uranium enrichment, which confirms what we heard came out from the foreign minister when he went on national television after the talks, dismantling its nuclear facilities and moving its uranium stockpiles out of the country. These were all non-starters for Iran. The official said Iran's proposal includes reducing the uranium stockpile to low enrichment levels under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Jim Swank, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate that a ton. Our proposal in Geneva is politically serious, technically creative, and includes everything required to reach an agreement immediately, the Iranian official told Al Jazeera. Now, al-Busadi said that the sides had been exchanging creative and positive ideas and hoped to make more progress. The other side, Witkoff and Kushner, were disappointed with the Iranian position. Sources say, wow, so looks like the United States not happy with Iran's presentation, despite what the mediators and what Abbas Araghchi are saying. And right now we're hearing those talks are taking place behind closed doors with Donald Trump, his staff, deciding what the next steps will be. If they report back to Trump that there was no breakthrough, it would make a military strike more likely. State of play: the U.S. came into the talks with a demand that Iran agree any future nuclear deal will remain in effect indefinitely. Another key U.S. demands were that Iran give up on its stockpile of 10,000 kg of enriched uranium. The U.S. was willing to show a degree of flexibility on Iran's demands that it retain the right of enrichment uranium, but only if Tehran could prove that there was no path to a bomb. Now, between the lines, Trump said in his State of the Union address that Iran needs to clearly say it doesn't want a nuclear weapon. Iran has long claimed to have no such ambitions. Now, Ali Shamkhani, a senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, wrote on X on Thursday as the talks were ongoing in Geneva that if this is the main issue for the U.S., it aligns with Khamenei's fatwa and Iran's defensive doctrine, and an immediate agreement is within reach. Now, Araghchi has sufficient support and authority for this deal, he wrote. Now, this is a developing story. We're going to see what unfolds, and as more comes out, I'll be sure to let you know, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. We're hearing the United States very disappointed with the talks. The Omanian mediator is claiming that there's going to be more talks upcoming in Vienna. They're going to be allowing the AIEA, or the EI, I can't remember, the Atomic Energy Agency, the AEIA, whatever it is, the watchdogs, to get access and be a part of this. We're going to see here if this is going to continue or if the United States is going to attack. Now, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Where do you think we're going to be going from here? But let's take a look at some more video footage. As I mentioned, a lot coming out since we've seen these meetings done, and there is a lot riding on what unfolds here with these meetings. We're going to see what the Trump administration decides. Let's go ahead and take a look.
It's a consequential day for the United States and Iran, both nations holding talks right now. Let's go live to CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Keeley. Okay, so Courtney, the same question. Iranian officials know that the U.S. is building up, amassing U.S. troops in that region. Does that provide any sort of motivation for them to bend any of their positions relative to having nuclear weapons?
Well, it's really interesting because we're hearing directly from the Secretary of Defense Counsel, Ali Shamkhani, on Twitter. And what he said is that Iran's non-manufacture of nuclear weapons is an alliance with the fatwa put out by the Supreme Leader. And that this is an alignment that could actually happen with Iran's Defense Council and might be happening in this second round of talks that we're seeing today. So we've heard that Steve Witkoff has said, why aren't they capitulating? We've seen the level of weaponry and armada in the region. We also are hearing, according to Pentagon sources, that there's a possibility that there's a complete drawdown of the Fifth Fleet personnel in Bahrain. So there's all preparations. Also watching what happens when the Indian leader Modi leaves Israel because he's there right now. So will Israel strike? Will the U.S. strike? Or will there be a deal? And so we're hearing also from the Omani foreign minister, who's the mediator to all this. He called these discussions this morning creative and positive. We know that the U.S. has red lines. Will they just make a deal on nuclear? The nuclear sites, Fordow, Natanz, they have really been decimated since June. Will they move the enriched uranium? These are all will they, won't they, read. And I'm so sorry I can't give you a definitive answer because the talks are going right now in Geneva. And Iran had brought the written proposal that President Trump wanted to see, and they took a break after the first round. They talked to the respective leaders in Tehran and D.C., and now they're back at it.
Okay, we know you're watching it. Relative to ballistic missiles, we know that this is also a talking point. Any reportable progress there?
Not really, because this is something that Iran won't talk about. They won't talk about proxies, and they won't talk about ballistic missiles, and they're very firm in that. This is a regime that has lasted by brute force and recent massacres. They're not one to give in easily. So we don't expect the Iranian regime to be okay with getting rid of ballistic missiles. But if there's any kind of deal, and if President Trump wants a deal as opposed to any strikes, they're going to have to thread this needle somehow about nuclear weapons and say the non-enrichment of uranium somehow has been agreed upon by both sides. That's where the sticking point is going to be, and they might just ignore ballistic missiles and proxies, even though the U.S. and the Secretary of State most recently said this is on the table, even though Israel is very worried about this, even though they pose a threat to U.S. assets in the region, as well as Israel in the region. We really have to wait and see.
I got to ask you, given your years of reporting your deep sources in Iran, in recent weeks, even months, we have heard Iranians on the ground, everyday citizens, sometimes with their children in their arms, saying they want the U.S. to intervene. They are ready for change, regime change in Iran. And yet I'm seeing the voice of the Iranian people sort of take a back seat to some of these high-level talks. What are you hearing from the families in Iran relative to U.S. intervention?
I've heard this outpouring of response to a social media post from last week where I said Iranians are scared, but they're resigned that U.S. strikes might help them get rid of this regime. Now, they went out and protested in January, and massacres ensued, most likely the worst, bloodiest massacres in recent history. And trust me, the Iranians have a record of brutality and executions. We're still hearing about that. We've seen university students, now that have gone back to the schools have reopened, post those protests in January, and they're in defiance. They're chanting freedom. The women are not in hijab, many of them, because they don't feel they need to anymore. There's complete defiance, especially from this young generation. And the one thing people miss that's so different from the previous conflicts where the U.S. involved, for instance, say, Iraq or Libya, was that the Iranian people are very sophisticated, and when they're able to use the internet, they're very vocal. And so I was hearing directly from families from Tehran saying, you're spot on. Please keep elevating our voice, keep amplifying our voice. We need regime change. That's not something that I hear from Washington. That's something I hear from ordinary people in Tehran.
Ordinary people, my bread and butter whenever I'm on the air. Thank you, Courtney Keeley.
There you have it, you guys, and we've heard this vocalized several times now that the people of Iran actually want Donald Trump to strike. They want to see the Iranian regime removed from power. So they are saying, Donald Trump, the United States, please strike now. And we're going to be seeing where we go from here because, as I mentioned, the talks today that we're hearing did not yield a deal. Let's take a look at some more updates coming out.
Next one, Congressman. Right now, the U.S. and Iran are holding a third round of nuclear talks in Geneva. U.S. envoys Witkoff and Kushner, they're seen here, we've got a picture, with Oman's foreign minister. Now, according to foreign sources, there has been a pause in the talks. We don't know if it's just a break for lunch or something deeper. We'll update that with more information when we get it. But, Congressman, can we get, it's the same old question, can we get a deal without using military force? Time's short.
I don't think you never get a deal with the Iranians. All they're doing is buying time. I don't trust them. And the one thing I don't want my children and grandchildren to have to deal with a nuclear-armed Iran. I don't want to deal with a nuclear Iran. The president in the State of the Union was very clear that he was not going to accept that. And so there's going to have to be extraordinary measures to make sure that the Iranians never achieve nuclear power or become a nuclear power. And again, I don't trust that regime because every time that we make a deal with them, they're always somehow breaking it. They get some kind of monetary reward. It breathes new life into the regime, and they just keep doing exactly what they've been doing all along. And they want to attain a nuclear weapon. And as Secretary Rubio said, their ballistic missile program is now becoming a threat, not only to the region but also to the United States. So for me, that's a non-starter. I'll see, we'll see what the outcome of these negotiations are, but whatever they are, unless we have our own people there making sure that that program is stopped, I don't trust them one bit.
What kind of military action do you think is possible? A bombing run on their ballistic missile factory? Or a rocket attack on the general who leads the Revolutionary Guard? What do we have in mind? Any idea?
I mean, I know what I would do. I would replicate that same thing that the Israelis did when they took out a bunch of their nuclear scientists in their own home, and decapitate the head of the snake, and that is the regime itself. So that's what I would do. But I'm not the president of the United States.
Yeah, but Congressman, that was an honest answer. That was an honest answer.
Yeah.
We kind of like that, Don't get a lot of them.
Okay.
Congressman, come again soon.
There you have it. Another individual saying, hey, take out the IRGC, cut off their heads, remove them from power. Now, in addition to that, take a look at this video clip. Now, this coming out today from Congress, from a Republican from Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy, and he says that the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, they want to kill you. He said that they are Islamic extremists, and they are saying that they want to end the lives of Americans. Let me know if you agree in the comments with what he has to say. Take a look. Coming out today, a very powerful statement in Congress from Senator John Kennedy.
Iran. I'm not talking about the people of Iran. I'm talking about the political and religious leadership of the government of Iran. I'm talking about the Ayatollah and his followers. And in America, we separate government from religion. Not in Iran, thanks to the Ayatollah. The government tells you what religion to practice. The government is the religion. Now, everybody has the right to believe what they want. I'll tell you what the Ayatollah believes. He's Muslim. But his strain of Islam says that if you do not agree with his interpretation of God, then you deserve to die. You do. And he acts on that belief. Now, let me say again, the Ayatollah is entitled to believe what he wants. I was raised a Presbyterian. My parents founded 2 Presbyterian churches. When Becky and I got married, Becky was a Methodist. I was a Presbyterian. We compromised. I became a Methodist. I'm entitled to believe what I want. But the Ayatollah not only thinks that I'm going to hell because I don't agree with his religion, he wants to kill me. He wants to kill Americans and Israelis and anybody who does not believe in his jihad and drink our blood out of a boot. And he's acted on that. I don't need to tell you, Mr. President. I don't need to tell you. And he has acted on that. And that's not acceptable. Now, a lot of the people in Iran, the good people in Iran, don't agree with Ayatollah. If they disagree with him too loudly, he just kills them. Now the Ayatollah, it's actually been the case for the last, 10, 15, 20 years. The Ayatollah has decided he wants a nuclear warhead. Why should we care? You know, I hear from some of my fellow Americans all the time, why do we need to be involved in Iran? Why should we care? Well, number one, we're not trying to start a war in Iran. The president is trying to end the war in Iran. If the Ayatollah gets a nuclear weapon, he will use it. He could use it against America. He could use it against Israel. I don't know who he'll use it against, and I hope I'm wrong, but he will use it. And you know what else will happen? As soon as he gets a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia is going to get a nuclear weapon. And the UAE is going to get a nuclear weapon. And Japan's going to get a nuclear weapon. And South Korea, and I could go on and on and on. And the more nuclear weapons you have in the world, the more likely you are to have a nuclear war. But that's not the only thing the Ayatollah has done since he became the Ayatollah. He exports terrorism. He was the person behind Hamas and Hezbollah that have killed so many people throughout the world. Not just in the Middle East, but across the world, including, but not limited to, Americans. That's why we ought to care. The Ayatollah also has conventional ballistic missiles and is building more as we speak. Now, those missiles can't reach America yet, but they're working on one, and they can sure reach our military bases in the Middle East, and they can sure reach Israel. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. That's why we should care. And finally, the Ayatollah, if you disagree with him, and we've seen it happen on TV, we don't know how many people he's hung in the last 6 months. We don't know how many people he's tortured. I've seen estimates as high as 50,000. So that's what this business with Iran is all about. We're not trying to be the world's policeman. We're trying to stop the Ayatollah from being the world's policeman, who's getting a lot of support from President Xi Jinping in China and Vladimir Putin in Russia and Kim Jong-un in North Korea. So that's where we find ourselves, trying to stop this war. And to the Ayatollah, I would say, Ayatollah, you're entitled to believe what you want. You can hate me. You can believe that. I know you hate me and what I stand for. You know how I sleep at night knowing that you hate me? With the fan on. That's your right. But you can't act on that belief. Put down the nuclear weapons. Put down the nuclear enrichment. Stop exporting terrorism to Hamas and Hezbollah. End your missile program. Stop killing and torturing your people. That's all we want. And he's doing that as we speak. He's at war. We're trying to stop it. I'm not about to tell the president, give the president any advice. He has intelligence that I don't have. And I respect the fact that he's being very, very deliberate and careful in making a decision. If we make a deal with Iran, let's make sure we have a protocol to enforce it. Because my experience in watching the Ayatollah through the years, I wouldn't trust this man if he was 3 days dead. I wouldn't trust him if he was 3 days dead. Anybody whose religion tells them that in order to be saved, they've got to go kill hundreds of millions of people, you can believe it if you want. But as far as I'm concerned, it's time to get a new religion. And that's what we're doing in Iran. Let me say it again. We're not trying to start a war. This war began a long time ago. We're trying to end it. Our president presiding today knows exactly what I talked about. He served honorably, had great physical, mental, and emotional expense in the Middle East. That's what we're trying to stop.
There you have it, you guys, and that was today, February 26th. Mohammed is asking, Steve Ram, are you live? Yes, we are live with the breaking news update that the talks that took place in Geneva today with the Omani mediator, they started, they paused, they resumed, and now we're hearing that they have concluded and there is no peace deal that has been met. And we're hearing that Donald Trump is in closed-door meetings now all day today. There is no press that's allowed in there, and they're saying it is likely, as we saw from the video clips, war room briefings discussing the next steps as the Geneva talks have yielded no deal. Now, we're hearing that Oman and the Iranian side is claiming that there are going to be more talks that are going to be discussing details with the IAEA, discussing their nuclear programs. Coming up here soon, there's going to be a fourth round. The United States, though, is reporting they were very disappointed with the talks. And that coming out today in Congress, they're saying that they want to remove the IRGC, Muslim-led Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, and they want to remove the regime that is currently in place in Iran. And the Iranian people are saying, please strike now. And it is looking like we are potentially going to be going that route here, as we have seen nothing yielded at this time in the form of some sort of deal. Let's take a look at some more video footage coming out. It's pouring in today, February 26, 2026.
Stakes talks right now. I know you're in Israel. Third round of talks are in Geneva right now. They took a break at lunch. No word yet if there's any progress being made. But when Witkoff and Kushner sit down with the foreign minister and their contingent, what do you think would be something they could walk out with that would make you feel as though Iran is acquiesced and we don't have to use military force?
So I think the administration is looking for three things. Stop killing your people when they protest. Abandon any kind of nuclear weapons enrichment, nuclear enrichment, and abandon your missile program. And a fourth thing, abandon proxies like the Hezbollah terror group, which have destabilized the region. But when you add all of that up, none of those are big things to give up for a normal non-terror regime. But when you say that to the Islamic Republic, you're really saying become different people. And I don't think, it is likely that they will become different people overnight. They may try to pretend that they're becoming different people just to stall out the process, because they know that this amazing armada that President Trump put together can't stay there forever.
If they do take military action, what should the focus be? We don't want to occupy the country. There's no sense of an invasion. What kind of damage could we do to send the message to maybe make sure this terrorist state is not a problem in the Middle East like they have been for the last 47 years?
Right, that's right. So President Trump did not get elected to start forever wars in the Middle East, but now he has a chance to end a forever war, which is what the Islamic Republic has been waging on America since they first took office. And of course, the first thing they did when they took office was take a bunch of Americans hostage at the embassy. They've been attacking and blowing up Americans ever since, trying to assassinate politicians, even in the United States. So long as this regime is around, it will be a threat to the United States. And what we don't want is to have like one of these Marvel movies where the main evil bad guy is exiled to some ice planet at the end, only to return for the sequel, right? That is to say, an angry Iran is maybe the worst thing of all. And we know they're going to wait out. They're going to try to wait out the Trump regime. So this is the chance to really end this half century of warfare and terror against America.
I think the president realizes that he's uniquely qualified to finish this guy off. And this might be the time.
Absolutely.
Eugene, thanks so much. Appreciate your insight. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
There you have it, you guys. Let's take a look at some more coming out.
But first, there's this. The U.S. and Iran holding a third round of nuclear talks in Geneva today, negotiating the future of Tehran's nuclear program as the U.S. builds up its military force in the region. President Trump warning bad things, quote unquote, could happen if Tehran does not agree to a deal, maintaining he prefers a diplomatic solution, something he told me back in Davos and has been saying repeatedly. Iran's foreign minister, meanwhile, says an agreement is, quote, within reach. Meanwhile, NATO shifting air surveillance toward Iran, reflecting growing concerns over a potential U.S.-led military campaign. Joining me now live from Brussels is U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. Ambassador, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for being here. It feels like things are spiking, the tensions rising. Are we going to see strikes on Iran?
Well, first of all, President Trump was clear in the State of the Union that he prefers diplomacy, but he has all the options on the table and he holds all the cards. I mean, we've demonstrated in Midnight Hammer that when President Trump draws a red line, that he's willing to enforce that. And he's right, that would be a bad day for Iran if we get to a kinetic solution. But the options are on the table right now to make a diplomatic deal, to agree to never have a nuclear weapon, because we cannot let the number one state sponsor of terrorism and a real menace to the region have capabilities to bring nuclear Armageddon. And so we just have to get this resolved diplomatically. But again, President Trump is in a position of strength right now to negotiate this deal.
How do our NATO allies feel about all of this?
Well, we're allies, which means that we support each other. And in this case, you know, all of our allies are willing to support the United States of America and to do what's necessary. Yeah. You know, some more loudly than others. But, you know, right now, this is a United States of America effort, but we have a lot of allies in the region and in Europe here that are willing to support us in whatever it takes.
Well, look, I'm worried about, and the viewers are worried about Russia and China. Meanwhile, NATO reportedly falling behind Russia and China in the race to build up icebreakers and other tools critical for the potential war in the Arctic. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum is renewing President Trump's calls to take on Greenland.
There you have it, you guys. And we're hearing that with everything that's going on with Iran, we also have the conflict with Russia, Ukraine. We have China right now. There is a lot of conflict taking place, but it looks like the United States potentially could be getting into a direct conflict with Iran here very soon, as these talks have yielded no deals. Let's take a look at more video footage. There is a lot coming out. They're all covering the details of what is looking like the starts of war. Let's go ahead and take a look.
U.S. and Iran have resumed high-stakes nuclear talks in Geneva this morning. The U.S. has been building up its forces in the Middle East, as we've been reporting. President Trump now weighing military action against Iran, as you know. Speaking yesterday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned Tehran's ballistic missiles posed a big problem at these talks. Listen.
We hope progress can be made, because that's the president's preference, to make progress on the diplomatic front. But it's also important to remember that Iran refuses to talk about the ballistic missiles, to us or to anyone. And that's a big problem.
CBS News foreign correspondent Remi Inocencio is following this story for us from our London bureau and joins us now. Remi, good morning. Always great to see you. As we heard there, Secretary Rubio pointing to Iran's ballistic missiles as a real sticking point with negotiators. Help our audience understand specifically what threat they pose.
Sure, absolutely, Errol, and good morning. Well, today will be a test of red lines, and some are seeing this as possibly the last test of those red lines that both the United States and Iran have laid out, and whether any kind of compromise can be reached. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are in Geneva now and with U.S. delegation in one room. Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, and the delegation there in another room with Oman. Their mediators shuttling messages back and forth again, because remember, these are indirect talks, definitely on Iran's nuclear program. That's been the main focus here. Very likely on sanctions relief that Iran wants. The rial still hitting record lows, losing something like 75% of its value over the past year, and possibly, as we heard about, ballistic missiles that Marco Rubio talked about there. But yesterday, Araghchi implied their use, at least. He warned the U.S. about trying to attack his country. Take a listen.
There would be no victory for anybody. It would be a devastating war. And since the Americans' bases are scattered to different places in the region, then unfortunately, perhaps the whole region would be engaged and would be involved.
So targets is what he's talking about. And there are 9 U.S. air bases spread across the Middle East. You can see there Turkey, Jordan to the west, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain is home to the U.S. Fifth Fleet, and Qatar home to the Al Udeid Air Base, the biggest in the region. All told, something like 40 to 50,000 U.S. service members there. On top, as we've been saying time and time again, 2 aircraft carriers now in the region, the Ford and the Lincoln. So the next hours, Errol, will decide basically if the next step is towards a deal or towards conflict.
And for so many reasons, Rami, it's beneficial for both sides to get some type of agreement here. So where is there space to bridge the gap between Tehran and Washington in these talks?
Right. For one, I guess we can say at a baseline, President Trump and Iran's foreign minister appear to be agreeing at least on one thing about the nuclear program. Trump this week said Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Araghchi, the foreign minister, said Iran's not pursuing nuclear weapons. So let's say that's true. We put that to one side. Then the next level down is Iran's civilian nuclear program. And I spoke with one of the leading global experts on Iran about this, Sanam Vakil, who said that this could be the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest compromise. Take a listen.
The main thing that Iran can give is a commitment to not enrich uranium above a certain grade inside Iran for a number of years. And so what it is looking for is an ability to enrich uranium at very low levels for medical purposes.
And some background here. In the 2015 nuclear deal, Iran agreed to enrich uranium to 3.67%. Remember that number, because that's for civilian nuclear reactors for energy. President Trump pulled out of that deal, and then the IAEA, the nuclear watchdog, confirmed just last May Iran had enriched uranium up to 60%. So 3.67 to 60%. And this other number, anything above 20% is considered highly enriched. 90% is weapons grade. Once you go past 20%, experts say it's basically a hyperbolic trajectory up to weapons grade material.
And we've heard that they are within 1 week away from enriching up to 90%. We've actually heard that report recently. Before we were hearing there was just one small technical step, maybe 2 weeks away. Now they're saying 1 week away. So it's not going to take very much for them to have a nuclear warhead, in which Donald Trump is saying Iran can never have nuclear capabilities for weapons of mass destruction, because if they do, they will use it on the United States or Israel, as they call us the big Satan, Israel the little Satan. They shout death to America, death to Israel. And right now we're hearing, there's no need for them to go up over 3% enriched uranium in order to have that nuclear power. But they're saying to go that high to where they're at 60% is likely because they want weapons. They're saying that there is no reason for that whatsoever. And Donald Trump is saying we have got to put an end to that. They said we need to get rid of their enriched uranium, stop their development of it. And today, right after the talks, we saw Abbas Araghchi had said that things went well, but on television, we saw them come out and say, we will never give up our rights to enrich uranium to potentially have any nuclear weapons. Let's go ahead and take a look at some more video footage coming out.
Good early morning, Carly. Glad you made it in. Those indirect talks brokered by Oman's foreign minister set to resume any minute now in Geneva. It's not clear if the U.S. will actually engage Iran face-to-face. The notes are passed by intermediaries. Now, many see this as a last-ditch effort to prevent a war between the United States and Iran. And Vice President J.D. Vance shared a recent assessment about their nuclear program yesterday.
The principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild the nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem, as the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically. But of course, the president has other options as well.
Axios reporting White House envoy Steve Witkoff told a private gathering on Tuesday that the Trump administration is demanding that Iran agree any future nuclear deal will remain in effect indefinitely. President Trump and other critics of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal negotiated by the Obama administration seized on those sunset provisions as one of its main flaws. Now, new satellite photos indicate Iran trying to access the 3 nuclear sites bombed by American B-2 bombers and that guided missile submarine in June as part of Operation Midnight Hammer. Iran's foreign minister says his country is not ready to give up what he calls peaceful nuclear technology. And the Pentagon continues to bolster forces in the region. A squadron of 5th-generation F-22 Raptors arrived at an Israeli airbase for the first time yesterday. More Raptors landed in Britain yesterday from the 1st Fighter Wing based in Langley, Virginia. And evacuations are also underway. Officials say the headquarters of the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet in Bahrain has now been reduced to mission-critical levels. Less than 100 people remain. We saw something similar before Operation Midnight Hammer, an indication strikes could be coming very soon. Carly, Todd.
All right, Lucas Tomlinson live for us in Washington. Lucas, thank you. Let's bring in national security and military analyst Rebecca Grant. Dr. Grant, thank you so much for joining us. So these talks are taking place right now, and I think it's safe to say that optimism is low, that they will lead to any real and lasting change. At the same time, Steve Witkoff is conducting them, and he has a proven track record. So what are the chances that these negotiations lead to something significant?
Well, first of all, the deployment of F-22s into Israel tells me this is very serious and perhaps very imminent. That said, Ambassador Witkoff is probably the one person who could get this done. So I'm going to give him still a chance to get Iran to agree. I mean, Carly, it's a no-brainer. Iran needs to give up that 972 pounds of enriched uranium and curtail their missile programs. That's the bottom line that President Trump has to hold out for.
Yeah, and the president and the administration has made it clear that it's not just, there's no end deadline to this. This has to be lasting change. But if these talks do fail, Dr. Grant, the U.S. and Israel could be looking to unseat this regime by force. That's not off the table. And you have a great op-ed for FoxNews.com that you wrote. It's titled Ayatollah's Arsenal versus American Firepower, Iran's Top 4 Threats and How We Fight Back. So how could Iran threaten us militarily if we do get to that phase? And what do we do to combat it?
Well, Iran's number one threat is their ballistic missile arsenal, and their foreign minister was boasting about it just a few months ago, that it's more powerful than ever. So you can see why that needs to be curtailed. That's why we have 7 U.S. Navy destroyers, Patriot systems, and other forces deployed for force protection. And it's an arc that goes from the ships in the Eastern Med across the land bases where U.S. forces are and all the way over to the North Arabian Gulf. The U.S. Navy has been terrific in shooting down Iran's ballistic missiles using SM-3 and other weapons. This is a good force protection arc. Don't forget, F-35s off the carrier Lincoln bagged an Iranian drone, and there are many, many other land-based air assets in place. They're there to strike if needed, but their number one job, of course, as always, is force protection for our U.S. forces.
Yeah, and of course, Iran also has those proxies. And the U.S. State Department just ordered non-emergency personnel to evacuate the embassy in Beirut, Lebanon. So now we're talking about Hezbollah. Does that mean that Hezbollah could still be activated and considered a real threat, despite the fact that they were deeply diminished by Israel?
Yes, Hezbollah has been deeply, deeply diminished, as you say. To me, the evacuation order is proactive. It means that, hey, if this gets big, we're not going to have time to come do an embassy evacuation. So let's get that down to minimal manning now. We see that at some other bases as well, and that's to reduce the footprint and increase force protection again. And don't forget, at our military bases, big Patriot missile and other force protection in place.
And, you know, if we're talking about regime change, the question becomes, if that does happen, who replaces the current regime? I know that some people have chanted the former Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi's name in the streets, but he hasn't lived in Iran for decades. So what do you think about that? The power vacuum that this could cause?
Right. And the polls say about 30% of Iranians like Pahlavi. Others want something else. The trouble, of course, is getting the IRGC and the Basij and the other elements of the Ayatollah's regime out of power, and it's very tough. And, you know, I know this is why President Trump's number one objective is still to make a deal. And, hey, don't forget, Iran doesn't need to enrich anything. They can buy nuclear power plant fuel on the open market from Canada and Kazakhstan like all the rest of the world does. So that regime is risking everything and risking the Iranian people. But, hey, you can't trust them after what they've done, killing 32,000 of their own. I think that regime is in a very, very fragile position.
Well, these talks are going on right now, and all we can hope for is big news to come out of them. Dr. Grant, thank you so much for joining us.
There you have it, you guys. And the big news is that there is no deal. I've been sharing with you the live feeds as we're hearing that nothing came from this. And right now, Donald Trump is in a closed-door briefing. Take a look here. Live updates. U.S.-Iran nuclear talks wrap up with no announcement of a deal as the risk of war currently looms. And you heard that individual in that interview mention something very important. She said, Iran doesn't need to enrich uranium. They could simply buy nuclear power from another nation like everybody else does. They do not need to enrich it and get it up to 60%, one technical step away, 1-2 weeks away from 90%, which would give them a nuclear warhead. So they're saying the United States is actually valid in their approach to go ahead and say, hey, no enriched uranium whatsoever for Iran. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but they said it is very likely that by next week, we could potentially be in war here. Let me know your thoughts. War? Peace? Where do you think we're going to be next week? Now, the Omanian mediator and Iran are saying that there's going to be a fourth round of talks in Vienna, but we're hearing that the United States was very disappointed with the results of today's talks. They started, paused, restarted. After that, we heard that there was progress, but we're hearing that right now Donald Trump is in closed-door meetings, and as I shared with you, reports coming out, those meetings are likely war briefings. We will see. I will keep you up to date as more unfolds. And thank you guys so much for all the support in the chat. I see a lot of people hitting the like button, a lot of people interacting. Appreciate you guys a ton. I'll keep you up to speed on everything. Stay tuned. More live stream updates coming. And I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. God bless. This is Steve.